Okay, I think we're live now. So, hello, everybody. Joanna here, and welcome to episode 9 of Why Read. This is the discussion series where I love to ask lovely booktubers why they read, because I think it's one thing to get into reading, to fall in love with reading when you're younger, but it's a whole other thing when life gets busy to question why we pick up books. And so, here with me today, I have two wonderful guests. I'm so excited to have Merphy Napier here with us today. Hello, Merphy.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you. And then also here with me is my good friend Jimmy Nuts. How's it going, Jimmy?
I couldn't be any better. This is the only place in the world I want to be right now. So thanks for having me.
Oh, well, I'm so honored. I'm so honored. And so, of course, we always have to start with the question, why read? So, another way to think about this is when there are so many other things that you could be doing with your time, gambling in Vegas or
My
going
favorite
rock
pastime.
climbing, whatever it is, why pick up a book? And so, Murphy, why don't you answer this question for us?
Okay. For me, it's just that of all the things to do when you have a moment of time, reading is the one that's the most restful for me. I feel like I get more immersed in a book than I do in anything else. And I come away feeling like, all right, I'm ready to tackle the rest of my day more than I do when I do anything else. And because I have obsessive tendencies, I am just like, well, then I guess that's the one thing I want to do if it's my favorite thing.
Wow, nice. So it actually refreshes you, it replenishes you, gets you set up for the day?
Yeah, at the beginning of the day, midday, end of day, no matter what time I spend, anytime I have downtime, reading is the one that calls to me the most because I sink into the world more than I do with anything else, and I come out of it feeling like, oh, okay, I'm good now. Whatever stresses I had, I'm good now.
Hmm.
Yeah, that sounds almost like meditation in a way.
Yeah, a little
Like you're
bit.
kind of zoning into a space and then coming out like, okay, here I am. I'm ready to
Yeah.
tackle some things. That's cool. I love that. And what about you, Jimmy? Why do you read?
Mostly so I can look down on people who don't read. And then when people are like, "I watch TV," I'm like, "Well, I read." That's
There you
really it.
go.
Yeah,
That'll
I'm
make people like you.
yeah, like I like looking down my nose at people. It's
Yeah,
it's
you
one of
have
my
friends,
favorite.
I'm sure.
I'm a blast at parties.
Oh, I believe
Uh,
it. But you don't go to parties. You read.
Why I'm
That's
reading.
right.
I don't have
Oh,
time. I take my book to the party actually, and I read in the corner. And I'm like, they don't know Tom
No,
Bombadil
sit in
wasn't
the
in the
middle of the
movie.
room. Get on the coffee table, cross-legged, and just read. And just be like, I'm better than you. And
I
then just
did do
keep
that once
going.
in middle school, actually. I went to a kid's birthday party and like I wasn't really invited, but my best friend got invited and I was at his house. So he like took me and no one liked me there.
You
So
weren't even invited, so
I
you
wasn't
whipped
really,
out a book.
I didn't want to
aw.
go, but my parents weren't home. So I just went. Everyone's like, why is he here? And I was like,
Oh, that's sad.
and I was reading like a Carl Duker book who wrote like teen YA sport drama. And it was amazing. His book Heart of the Champions was the first book ever made me cry. I remember I was in like 7th grade English class and I was just like, wow, this waterworks. And everyone's like, what's wrong with him? Why is he wearing the same clothes he wore yesterday? It's because I was poor. Okay. Anyways, so other than the status of reading, I also love reading because I find it to be the most versatile way of engaging with any form of media. A lot of times when I watch TV shows, I feel like I kind of fall out of favor with them. Video games don't appease me as much as they used to. It takes a lot for me to get into that. But I have found with reading that I can find an escape in that, which is very, very comforting. And I kind of relate to what Murphy was saying there, but also in the fact that, like, if I want to laugh, like, there's an option for that. And most of the books that I read have a lot of different facets to them that I can explore. So whether it be escapism or finding something that is very meaningful for me thematically that can, like, change my life, I think that that is available to me within the pages of a book that an author has penned. And that is powerful. And for me, that feels like the most everlasting, like, permanent fixture in humanity is when something's written and other people consume it. And I think it's just a beautiful thing. And I have a lot of respect for anyone who takes the time to do that and subject themselves to criticism and to put their interpretation of the human condition out there. So I would say that's probably why I read.
Yeah, those are all interesting reasons. Learn something new about my friends on the show every single time. So
Joanna, I've never actually heard you answer the question. Why do you read?
that is a good question. Yeah, I think that at this point, and the reason I created this whole series is because I feel like reading is something I fell in love with based on, and it's still something I'm in love with because I love to feel immersed. I love immersion. I know that sounds like such a standard answer, but I think it's all about wonder for me. If I had to pinpoint maybe my favorite emotion, it might be wonder. And I love the way that literature can do that. So when I'm reading a story, I'm just in a state of wonder. I'm experiencing a world. I'm imagining things around me. I'm connecting to characters. And I don't know, I just love the emotional and immersive and visual experience that I have when I'm reading a book. And I love the way it makes me think about things in our world, like themes and things like that. But yeah, it's interesting because I feel like at this point, kind of like what you were saying, it replenishes you. It's something that you do every day now. It's something for me where I feel like it's become such a part of my daily routine that it's almost like I kind of joke about this. I'm like, reading for me almost feels like brushing my teeth. Like I would feel so off if I didn't read at least a little bit in a day. Like it's so important to me now, but I don't want to lose sight of why it's important. And I think especially when you, at least it's been my experience having a channel, I think there can become that pressure
Sure.
to have things to talk about and to make sure that you're reading enough. And I think that there's a lot of numeric value on reading these days that, for better or worse, it's there. And so I guess that just always wants that qualitative part of my brain wants to always come back and bring it to why am I doing this? Why is this meaningful to me? And I guess that's why I read, though. It's really just the wonder it brings me. And so when I can tap into that, I'm set. I am happy.
So
Yeah.
that's really interesting to me because you're drawn to a lot of darker stories,
I
a lot
know.
more, yeah, dark and complex. So if I didn't know you, if I didn't watch your channel, I would think, oh, she reads a lot of like middle grade whimsy. Like it doesn't match. So that's fascinating to me. What is it that brings you wonder specifically in books?
That's a really okay. So this is a really good point, and I was actually going to pose this to Jimmy too because Jimmy also likes a lot of dark books. I think he's pulled me a little into the dark side, honestly. So we could say that. But anyway, yeah, I think it's interesting because when I first got into reading, my gateways into fantasy specifically were Tolkien and The Neverending Story and The Princess Bride and
That
The
makes more
Last
sense.
Unicorn. So a lot of the whimsy. And
Yes.
nowadays, I have been drawn into a lot of darker content. And why that's the case, I really don't know. I don't know, but I know that it's still the same. Like, I mean, when I think about my favorite moments in books recently, even if they've been what's considered darker fantasy or darker books, like Jimmy and I just buddy read All the Pretty Horses. And, I mean, there were some lighter moments in that. I think it's because maybe the heartfelt moments feel all the more strong to me in the contrast of the
Mm,
darkness. And so I think that the darker tones, it's the chiaroscuro effect. It's like the darker the darks, the lighter the lights. And
Hmm.
so I love having a variety of tone and a variety of contrasts in the stories that I read. And I feel like it just adds a layer of meaning and a layer of wonder. That's my best answer for that.
no, I love it. I love it. The reason I ask is because wonder, I would say, is one of the greatest feelings to me as well as a reader. But I'm also drawn to a lot of darker stories, and I can't answer why that contradiction is there. So I wanted to hear your answer, and it's a good one. I appreciate it.
Yeah. What about you, Jimmy? What draws you to all the dark content? Because you just mentioned escapism as well. And I was thinking about that too. I'm like, yeah, I read to escape to some extent, but what am I escaping into? It's
It's
a
because
pretty
he's
strange
secretly a
thing.
villain.
There you go.
Well, I would definitely say that there is something to be said for like, at least my life isn't this bad. Like that is a thing, right? Like when you see Galatka struggling upstairs, you're like, well, hey, at least I can walk up the stairs right now. But more so than that, I've always been very interested about how people deal with specifically death and mortality and how one faces that. And I think whenever you take those chances to read the darker works that really dive into those things, like Cormac McCarthy always deals with death in every single one of his books. It's one of the things that he says that he feels like any great piece of literature has to deal with. And I don't necessarily know if that's a true statement, but I find that it does resonate with me. And that's one of the reasons why I enjoy his books. You will not read a story of his without having to face that question of mortality. And that always has just captivated me. I'm kind of obsessed with it. Sometimes I go to sleep and I can't sleep because I think about, what happens at the end. Not just for me, but for the people I love. So I do think that there's just some intrinsic baked in sadness in me or something that makes me question these things. But I've also found that I don't like darkness for darkness sake. That's not really what I'm there for. I can't say the shock value doesn't work at times, but it is not the driving force behind me enjoying something like the second apocalypse or something like that. And on the question of like why read and why it's so powerful, this is a quote from R. Scott Baker that I really love. He's talking about a profound gamble. He says, to open a book was not only to seize a moment of helplessness, not only to relinquish a jealous handful of heartbeats to the unpredictable mark of another man's quill, it was to allow oneself to be written. For what was a book, if not a long consecutive surrender to the moments of another's soul? And that is, for me, that's hard hitting.
Is that in The Prince of Nothing?
Yes, that is in the
I remember that quote.
Yeah, it's in the Warrior Prophet. It's one of my favorite quotes. I have like a little clipboard, and that's one of them that I always have. And so I don't know. There's something about seeing how other people interpret those events, I think, that are really important. I also have found it to be a little bit therapeutic reading Berserk at some points, and I've actually had a lot of people reach out to me in the comments that are saying that they went through like similar traumas that happened in that series, and actually it was a way for them to like, I would never use the term to get over it, but to process it and to live with it. Yes. And I think that that's a really powerful tool. And I think if done correctly can help a lot of people as well. So there's a lot to that question, and I don't know the answer. Joanna, I do think you answered it beautifully. I don't know if I could do any better than that, but I would say that those are the things that pop into my mind whenever I think about all the dark books that I read. Though I have to say, as someone who reviews these books, I do get worried that people are like, what is wrong with that guy?
Well, I sometimes question that about myself. I'm like, what is wrong with me that I'm like drawn to this work? But it's interesting because actually Jimmy and I were in a Baker discussion for R. Scott Baker a few months ago when we read the first book in the Prince of Nothing trilogy. And that series is incredibly bleak. It is so dark. I think that somebody said it made Malazan look like puppies and rainbows. If you can imagine that, I know. And we were having a conversation about hope and hopelessness, because I know Philip was in that discussion and saying that he prefers to have a little more hope in his stories. And I was saying that too. I said, I don't mind darker books, but I prefer if we can land in a place that allows hope. Because to me, hope, there's that saying, hope rings eternal. And I feel like hope opens the doorways to wonder. And so I was with that statement for a while there. But now that I've read McCarthy, I think it was really McCarthy that did this, but some of Baker too. I realized that those books, even as dark and bleak as they are, they also evoked a sense of wonder in me. And I do wonder if it's related to what you were saying, Jimmy, about mortality and about death, because there is something that is kind of wondrous to me about our mortality, the fact that we're here just a short time, about impermanence, and also about death itself, which is just a big question mark as far as I'm concerned. But yeah.
Jimmy, have you read the posthumous memoirs of Bras Kubas?
I don't know if I could spell that. I have not, but I'm interested.
This is it right here. The posthumous memoirs of Bras Kubas. It's a Brazilian classic.
Okay.
I think it's exactly, I'll hype it. I think it's exactly what you would like. Okay. It's weird. Okay. It's weird. It's strange. And there's a big fixation on mortality and eternity and the futility of life and all the things that you seem to be interested in. This is written posthumously after he died. He wrote this memoir. And he dedicated it, it's obviously fiction, he dedicated it to the first worm that took a bite out of his corpse, because there's no one on earth worthy of having the book dedicated to them. I think you'd like it. It's weird, but I think you'd like it.
I don't know if I was just insulted or...
It's one of my favorite books that I've read recently. Within the last couple of years.
All right, it'll be here tomorrow. So thank you.
Oh, wow. As someone who's trying not to buy books right now, I want that impulse.
Yeah, I'm just giving up all self-control when it comes to book buying. Yeah, it'll be here tomorrow. So thank you.
Okay. Well, I
Appreciate it.
hope you enjoy
Nice.
it. It's strange, but it's good.
That's
Yeah,
awesome. Love
that
the book
sounds exactly up.
recommendations here.
Sounds exactly up my
Well, we're book
alley.
nerds, so I think so too.
I'm very
Fantastic.
intrigued. Murphy, did you have a point where you decided to get into darker books, or did you start out light and then find your way into the darkness?
I definitely started out light
Yeah.
and found my way into the darkness. I think I don't go. I think you both dig into the darker side of literature deeper than I do. Abercrombie is one of my favorite authors. I'm like knee deep into Malazan, not quite waist deep, but knee deep into Malazan. And but like there are a series like Berserk that I just don't think I can handle. Like there's a certain I take a long break between my Malazan books. I need a little bit of light mixed in with the dark as far as what I read. But I think for me a lot of it is just digging into humanity. It seems like there's a lot more of that in the more grim stories, digging into like what makes a person tick and how far will people go, and kind of that questioning. And I'm a very hopeful, positive, upbeat person, so that kind of just makes my brain think in a different kind of way than I naturally am inclined to, which is fascinating to me.
That's a
Yes.
really cool thing.
I think reading opposite of yourself is important. I think that there's a lot of lessons to be learned there. I read House in the Cerulean Sea, which couldn't be further from the normal fare over on the Fantasy Nuttwork, but my God, it was good.
Did you love it?
Yeah, I smiled. Like I was like, this is great. I loved Lucy. What a great character. Just right up my alley when it came to humor. And I was so glad that I loved it. It was something that my wife and I both were able to enjoy together. And yeah, that's not something I would have done, but I did, and I'm glad I did. So I think I can see the attraction to reading kind of opposite of oneself. Bookborn is also a fan of First Law, and I always say she's my favorite optimist, and I'm very nihilistic, and we like somehow bond over that series, which is not a series that you would imagine someone like Bookborn would love, but she does. So
Oh yeah, she's a big fan.
Yeah. And I loved Legends and Lattes last year. It was like the perfect palate cleanser for me. So I don't know. Sometimes I'm surprised with what I end up liking. What was that?
It has a sequel, Legends and
Oh,
Lattes.
it does?
Mhm.
I didn't know that.
I don't know if it's already published or if it's being published within the next month, but it's like it's just now in the world, or just about to be.
Oh, wow.
Don't buy it, Jimmy.
I'm hands up. I'm not buying anything right now for now.
By the end of this video, let's see how many books we buy.
Oh, I can't go a
By the
weekend
end of the
without spending like
stream,
50
exactly.
hours. It's a problem.
That's so funny. And I'm also honestly very curious about Tress and the Emerald Sea, especially because I keep hearing it compared to The Princess Bride. And I did really enjoy that.
That was the inspiration.
In school. Yeah, that's right. That's what I had heard. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
It's very good. I loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard almost all positive things about it for the most part. And yeah, that cover is sick.
I know. It's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, it is gorgeous. I am half tempted. I'm half tempted to get it, but maybe.
Alan says, Joanna, you are not. You are Sanderson burned out.
I know. Oh, I've been on a Sanderson diet for a while. But that particular book has been, it's hearing all the buzz about it, but especially the Princess Bride inspiration, that does have me very curious. So
yeah, so Sanderson's wife, Emily, they were watching The Princess Bride, and she had mentioned that she loves the movie, but she just wishes that Buttercup had more agency. And that was the inspiration of this book, is that kind of setup, except the main character, Tress, is the one that's taking the lead in her. I hear an echo. Do you guys hear an echo?
I did for a second. Yeah.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure that I wasn't doing something. She's the one taking the lead in her adventure. She's the one going to save the boy, basically.
Nice.
It's really good.
I'll read it in like 10 years, and I'll post a review, and I'll act like it's brand new. It'll be great.
There you go. You probably haven't heard of this indie author. He's
small time.
Not really on the map yet, but he has potential.
At that point, he'll
Yeah.
have a full-fledged Stormlight adaptation. You know.
Exactly.
Does it ever affect you too whenever a book whenever a book comes out and it gets tons and tons of reviews and you feel like, well, I'm kind of the last person to review this book. I don't know if I want to do it right now, or I
Mhm.
don't know. Does that ever affect you?
Yeah, I mean, probably not in the way you're asking, but, like, if something's too popular, a lot of times I'm like, "I'm not gonna read it." Like, I turn into a teenage brat. I'm just like, "I don't wanna be like the cool kids," and I put it off even if I'm interested. I actually just got, I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCarty. I just got that from the library, and it's like, I've wanted to read this from the start, and I've just stubbornly not because everybody else was reading it, and that's dumb.
Yeah. Or even just to feel like you're the last person in the conversation, because I feel like
Yeah.
that affects me a bit. I'm like, but everybody's already talked about this, so I don't know if I want to be the last person in this conversation, if anybody's going to be interested anymore at this point. If I should wait
That
10
makes
years,
sense.
like Jimmy just said.
Yeah, I felt that way with Fairy Tale by Stephen King. So I was like a week or two after the release, and I was really excited about it, like many other people. But I read the first chapter or two, and I loved it. But then, like, everyone had already told me, like, it sucks in the second half,
Oh,
like, and it's
no.
like I felt like I wasn't having my own experience anymore, and
Yeah.
that's unfortunate because, like, that was my number one anticipated release for last year. So I said, you know what? I really love these first two chapters. Everyone's telling me that just wait, it sucks later, don't worry. And I'm like, you know what? I'll just read this in 5 years, where like no one's talking about it, and then I can just kind of have my own experience because it's impossible, or maybe almost impossible to have that not affect you in some way, shape, or form.
I think I
Um,
would have just shut my phone in the drawer for the weekend and just, like, binge read it.
I
And
probably should.
you shut the book in the drawer for 5 years.
I probably should have. And people. I mean, obviously, people are going to talk about it because it's a new release and such. But it was more like hey, I really like chapter one. And like, well, just wait, it sucks. And it's
That's
like,
so annoying. I'm sorry.
I had
it
that experience because I did read that book last year. And so I was in all these discords and I was so excited. I'm like, I'm experiencing this at the same time as everybody else.
Yeah.
But then there were so many people who read it like within a day and they're like, 3 stars, and just seeing that everywhere. I'm like, but I'm enjoying it so far. And yeah, it was kind of sad.
Did you
Yeah.
end up liking it?
I ended up agreeing with a lot of people that I really loved the first half. The first half is really, really good. And then where the plot picks up, I didn't really care for the portal fantasy part as much.
Hmm.
But I think people will vary. I think some people will really enjoy it, honestly. But yeah, it wasn't for me. I didn't really enjoy it as much as
I
I'd
think
hoped.
people are probably right. Like, you're probably right in that assumption, and I knew that, but I was like, I can't tell what I'm letting affect this. Like, I just had no bearing, or no base. Like, I just didn't feel right. So I had to, and big deal. It's another Stephen King book on the pile. Like, whatever, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's
Well, I'll
whatever.
say if you're somebody who likes when Stephen King, because in The Dark Tower, he's known for doing this, like where Stephen King does a nod to certain authors or does a nod to his other books,
Mhm.
that kind of thing. It didn't bother me at all in the Dark Tower series. And I felt like it was subtle enough at times. Sometimes it's very clear. But in that book, it's like the whole book is just about every other book out there, every other classic
Wow.
fantasy or um, H.P. Lovecraft, and about, he just nods after nods after nods to other authors and other works and to his own work. And so, and for me, it just felt too much. It felt too much after a while.
Yeah, that grates on me.
Reading is different now, as a legend once said. And
Cool,
Yes.
Jimmy.
yeah. Hey, honestly, I really like that video,
Mhm.
and
Thanks.
that's a conversation I've had multiple times on chatting with
Yeah?
trying to pin down like what are the pros and cons of this new age of reading and like this
Mhm.
hyper social atmosphere that we're in. And there's a lot of cons. I'm not saying that it's obviously
Oh,
it's worth it.
totally.
Like, it's obviously worth it to me because I have a channel and I talk with people, and I have met some of my like best of friends through this. But there are downsides, and that the new release thing happens to be one of them, I think.
Sure.
Mhm. Yeah, that is a good one. Yeah. I loved that video, Murphy. I absolutely loved that. I love any
Thank
type of
you.
well, I love all your videos, but like the ones that I particularly love the most on BookTube are video essays. I don't know They're something I always gravitate
Cool,
towards.
because I'm leaning into those as far as all the future videos I've got planned.
They seem like they take a lot of preparation too. I'm always so impressed with how you deliver them.
Thank you. I was very unsure about that one. I didn't feel like I got the delivery across the way I wanted, but I'm glad people enjoyed it. That makes me happy. I feel like I don't know. I feel like a lot of people either want to only talk about the good or only talk about the bad, and I think that there's a lot of merit to both sides of it. I mean, I personally obviously love making reading a social thing. I'm a very social person. I want to talk to people about books, but there's a lot that comes with that, especially just being online in general. That's really exhausting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially
Yeah, you
keeping
brought
up.
up some really good points too about comparison and pressure and how those two things tend to be kind of on the more negative side of things.
Yeah.
Do you feel how do you two deal with comparison? Is that something that comes up for you in your reading lives?
Not really.
As far as like comparison of how many things other people are reading.
Yeah, I think that that was something you brought up in the video, right? That a lot of times it's easy to look at other people and see they're reading so many other books than you are, or I think that was that maybe
No,
one of
yeah,
the
that
things?
was definitely
Mhm.
something I honed in on because that's something that I see a lot of people on BookTube or on Bookstagram or, these book blogs talk about bringing up like feeling like they have to read a certain amount in order to stay relevant or in order to be able to continue to produce content. Because I have such an obsessive nature. And so I'm just like, my hobbies are my me, they're who I am. I don't struggle to read. And so I don't find myself thinking, oh, I got to read more. But just because that's not something I experience doesn't mean that that's not like a very real thing that's within our community.
Yeah. I think you were even saying in that video, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you were also saying that you almost don't want to, you almost feel like you have to explain, like, yes, I read this much. And, you don't want other people to feel like they need
I
to
don't want
compare
people to
themselves
compare
to you.
themselves to me. Exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, there are people that are like, epic fantasy is like all they read. And I read small books as well as big books, which stacks my numbers. And for a long time, I just stopped counting what I was reading altogether. And just in the last 2 months, I started counting again. And I was like, I still don't like this. It's still not fun for me because it just feels I don't know, it feels too much like, okay, guys, look what I've done. And that's not what I'm
Mhm.
trying to do. I'm trying to
Right.
just have those conversations. So yeah, I do have a little bit of guilt because I read the comments that are like, "Oh, I haven't read that much," and I'm like, "No, what you've
No.
read is
Yeah.
wonderful."
And I
Yeah.
totally believe that because I see you as somebody who's always trying to build the community and to grow
Thank
the
you.
community. And it's like the more readers, the better. And so it would almost be a sad factor if that discourages anybody. Yeah.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah. But it is a
Jimmy, you said
thing
you don't
though.
feel comparison?
You don't compare yourself.
No, I had to kind of kick that a little earlier in my life when I was in wrestling. It is very easy to fall into like, I'm better than that guy. Why did he get the contract? That is a very real
Oh,
thing that happens all the time. And
Mm,
at one of my WWE tryouts, William Regal, um, I felt like he knew someone got a shot that like wasn't great. And he just kind of gave like the guys there that were there for the tryout, and he was like, every second you worry about what this other person has received is a moment you've like lacked in preparation for what you can receive in the future. And it's a very simple lesson, and like I'm
mm.
sure everyone's family told them that or teachers told them that, but coming from someone like that I respected so much, um it resonated with me. And I saw direct, like as soon as I stopped worrying about everyone else, I found that I was able to focus on like what I wanted to accomplish. And I saw a lot of success from that. And I'm not saying it's perfect. I mean, sometimes you notice things and it bothers you, and that's fair. But for me, I've always been focused on myself because it robs me of all of the joy that I get from anything that might be, a hobby. So jujitsu, right? Like I'm not the best purple belt in the world, but I'm better than I was like 6 months ago. Like I would beat 6 months ago's me easily. So,
tell
and
me
that's
about
all that.
jujitsu.
It's a hard sport. I just re-injured my knee right before I left for vacation, so I
Oh
have a partial
no.
tear in my patelliformal ligament again in the other knee, which is super annoying. But it's only a partial tear, so I don't have to get surgery, and I just got to take it easy. Yeah, jiu-jitsu is awesome. Jiu-jitsu
Yeah.
is
How long have you been doing it?
it's been 6 years, 5 or
Wow,
6 years. Yeah.
that's killer. How long do you feel like it took you to get to the point where you felt like I'm safe in, you know, walking down the street if somebody decided that I was their enemy today?
Okay, so I would say against someone with zero experience, I felt that way after 6 months. I
All
remember
right.
going back to Thanksgiving, and I have a friend. He was a wrestler in high school, and he was decent, and he was a heavyweight. He probably weighs like 280, and at the time I weighed like 180. And he was like, "Jiu-jitsu doesn't work," so we rolled, and I was like, "Okay, like first person to tap." And I beat the brakes off him, like with only like 6 months of training.
You
And
beat that. Now, everything I know about jujitsu, you're not supposed to be beating them.
well, smashing, submitting these kinds of things. So, and I was like, okay, like that's pretty cool. That's a really good feeling. So with no experience, just random person, like I would say 6 months to a year is very good, a good time frame to feel like you have at least some grasp of some fundamentals. But it is such a deep rabbit hole that I legitimately feel like just maybe 3 to 6 months ago, I started to really finally understand like the deeper levels to the problem solving that we have. And now, instead of like having competitive roles with blue belts and purple belts, I'm finding myself being able to be competitive with brown and black belts now. There's
Wow.
varying levels to all that stuff, so like what's that really mean? I'm not sure. But what I do know is like you'll be like, I got it all figured. It's like reading. Like you'll read and be like, I know exactly what I like, and then you'll read a book that like knocks you
Changes
for a loop.
everything.
Yeah, like when I read Malazan, I was like, oh, there's like another side of reading that I haven't experienced yet. I have been very much just like nodding along, like, yeah, that was fun. That was cool. I like that character. And then Malazan made me like kind of push myself a little further, and then getting into some of the more literary stuff, like, you know what I mean? So there's always more to learn.
So what about me, a weak little girl? How long do you think it would take me?
Oh, I mean, same. I would say it's the
Really?
same. So, fun fact, I remember when I moved here and I went against a blue belt. She's probably about 125 pounds. I was pretty strong at the time, and I was probably like 200 at that time. And I remember being like, "Oh, I got to take it easy. Like, I don't want to hurt her." And she messed me up.
Yeah.
I mean, literally could have
Yeah.
killed me if she decided. Like triangle choke, and like I'm tapping to say, "Yes, you killed me." Like if you hold this, I die. So yeah, and there are world beaters. I mean,
And
I
by
can't,
little girl, he means me, With the
not
alligator.
elves, Joanna, not
Oh,
elves.
darn it.
But no, I know there's females that I roll with all the time that absolutely massacre me. And we have one of the people who roll at our gym's a world champion, and she is insane. I mean, like I roll with her like I roll with anybody else, and I roll as hard as possible because I don't want her to beat me because she's scary. So
Killer. I'm
Yeah.
sorry for sidetracking everything. We're
Oh.
we're
Oh, I'm
looking at
happy.
getting the whole family enrolled in jiu-jitsu. And
Nice.
there's a gym that's just down the road from us that we're like, I think that's where we're going. So
Yeah,
Oh,
well,
that's
kids,
exciting.
kids and
Cool.
geese is the most adorable thing in the world. Like with their little, oh God, it's
yeah,
adorable.
my son is 6 and we just keep telling him you're going to fighting school and he's so hyped about it. And my daughter is 3 and she's a tornado and we're like, maybe not yet for her.
Yeah, I always wonder about that because I know as a kid, my parents, like, I wanted to take karate as a kid or something like that. And my parents were like, no, you're going to just, break everything in the house. But from what I understand, I mean, there's a whole discipline part of martial arts,
Right.
Jimmy? I don't know.
Burning off energy before sleepy time is also a benefit.
That's
At
probably
the end of the
true.
kids class, like there's different kids classes, but the youngest one at our school, like the end of the class is just running in circles because we're just like, just burn them out. Like we don't want to
Yeah.
take them. We want them sleeping in the car on the way home,
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's a great thing, especially for kids. And some of these kids now that are coming up, because like it's gotten a lot better, I think, in the way that we train. Oh my gosh, like the next generation's gonna be so good. So good. And it's exciting to watch. Like we have the kids competition class here. I mean, some of these kids go to worlds, they go to Pan Ams. I mean, they're athletes at 6 and 7 years old, and
Man.
they're competing at a high level to where like when I roll with them, like if I didn't have, 20 years on them of like muscle growth and, maturing, they'd probably kill me. But thankfully I get to bully them still. So that's good.
Great.
Cool.
Sorry, Joanna. You can
No.
put us back on track.
Joanna, you
All
need to go to jiu-jitsu too. Okay. I'm sick of this.
But it sounds like it has had some crossover into what you do here. Am I wrong? I mean, is that
absolutely.
true?
Yeah. I mean, my mindset, for how much wrestling cost me in my health, it very much instilled in me like pillars of who I am and how I do things. And it has been the key to my success. Jiu-jitsu and coding have a lot to do together. I was able to learn jiu-jitsu and coding at around the same time. And it's insane how much both of them are really just problem solving with different consequences. And yeah, they definitely benefit each other. And also it's nothing for me to sit like, I go get strangled and I come home and read a book. Which one do you think is more enjoyable? Definitely the reading of the book. Like it is, like Merphy said, it's very relaxing. And I love that. Like that is my kind of cool off time is coming home, reading for an hour. It's great.
Yeah, that's neat. I love to hear about the problem solving too, because I think it seems like it works different networks of the brain, and that could probably be transferable to different things. So I could see that.
Yeah, both things ask why. Why read, right? But like,
read?
why did I lose that role? Why did I get taken down? Why did I get my foot caught here? And then when you're reading and you're like, this isn't working for me, it's very easy to say this didn't work for me, but it's another thing to say why. And to be able to articulate that is the challenge, I think, and kind of what separates people from, the people who are making great videos. And that's something that I've tried to get better at. And I think that it makes reviews better as well. So it's the why in all of it that kind of drives, I think, progression.
Same here. Same here. I feel like that is definitely a skill to learn to identify exactly what it is that breaks your immersion or that isn't working for you in a book. That has taken me a long time to figure out. And sometimes I'm not always there either. Sometimes it's a little bit of me reaching to try to figure out what it is in the book that didn't quite work. How is that for you, Merphy? Has it always been pretty clear to you? Like whenever a book isn't working for you, because you're very good at articulating that, or is it sometimes
I'm super good at complaining? I love it. Super easy, barely an inconvenience. No, has it been? I think that's one thing that BookTube has been great for me is learning how to discuss a book instead of just saying I liked it, I didn't like it, which has been really interesting. There's an echo again. Is it just me?
Is it me? Let me see if I can mute myself.
I don't hear an echo anymore, but
but I stopped talking too. So
there it is.
No, do you still hear it? I don't hear it anymore.
I don't hear it anymore.
Okay. Well, Joanna, it might be. Do you have the stream muted where you're watching the stream?
Yeah, I do. Let me put on my headphones and see if that helps.
Okay. Cool. Sorry.
You two keep talking. Sorry.
Okay.
Let me see if I can get this figured out.
You're good.
No problem. BookTube. So it's been interesting because now I'm so used to talking to people who are very used to kind of pushing past those initial feelings and asking those whys, like, why did this work? Why did this challenge me? Why did I hate this thing? And figuring out how to discuss it and craving those discussions. Now, when I talk to somebody in real life who's a reader and I'm like, what'd you think? What'd you think? Tell me about the book. And they're like, yeah, it's good. And I'm just like, it's jarring because I'm so used to people who want to dig into the nitty gritty of everything and who have tried to figure out how to really push past that and figure out what they love and why they love it. And a lot of times for me, if I hate something about a book, then I'll spend way more time thinking about it because I have to figure out what is it about this particular thing that caused such a reaction from me. Is it something internal? Is it something I just don't like this thing? Is it something that I have to like work through? Or is it something that the author understands that I don't understand? Like it gets to me until I can figure out the why.
Yeah, I think one of the more important things there is like the fact that you actually assess the fact, like, is it me? Like a lot of times we don't ever like it's the author's fault every time.
Oh,
it's
sure.
Like that's not always true. Sometimes it is us. I felt that way with Pariah by Anthony Ryan. I think that's probably a great book that I just didn't get. and didn't enjoy, but he didn't do anything wrong. Like, it's just me.
And it could be
Definitely,
just a bad match.
yeah,
Right?
just a bad match or a bad time. Time's everything.
I think we oftentimes also have just personal experiences that would make certain things grate on us more, or personal issues
Mhm.
that we have to just kind of acknowledge, like, oh, okay, you know what? That's a me thing. Or there's a pattern of me getting offended a lot every time I see this thing come up. Is that something that I need to work through, or is there a reason for that? Or is that something that I want to discuss? Or like, why does this keep coming up? That's something that I've recently
Hmm.
been working through. Is there were patterns I noticed that would like offend me in certain books. And I was like, okay, my reaction is very strong. Let's sort this out.
Hmm.
And now I still don't like this thing, but now I can process my emotions better and have a more uh, regulated response to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I
Makes it
think
more
that that's a
measurable.
practice of like that takes some distancing to understand, oh, why is this affecting me, like you said? And it's interesting too, because I feel like um, for me to say it's a me thing, to me, that almost felt like a cop out answer for me for a long time because I would be
Hmm.
like, oh, it's not the book, it's me. This just doesn't work for
It's
me.
because you're
This
so
just doesn't.
nice.
Yeah. Well, it's, and, but I have been trying to push myself more. That is a skill that I do want to develop more, is to be able to identify, okay, maybe it is a me thing, but what is it about this thing that is affecting me? Like you said, to look at that critically though, too, to say, okay, if this isn't working for me, why is this irking me? What specifically is it? Um, yeah. So I think it can be looked at critically either way. But it can't
Yeah.
be a cop out either way. It could be a cop out to
Sure.
say, "Oh, it's the author,"
Yeah.
or, "Oh, it's just
Sure.
me." But to be able to look at it critically either way, I think is a skill.
I think it's
Yeah.
what follows, right? Like, you can say it's just me, or you can elaborate. And sometimes that does take some personal anecdotes that maybe you don't want to share, which I think is
Oh,
fair.
yeah.
That's
That's
true.
100% valid. There's reasons why I love books that I find for very personal reasons that I don't share, just because this is the internet and anyone can watch it, and that's odd. But I understand what you mean, like saying that, like, it was the book, not me, and then feeling like it's a cop out because people think that you are just trying to be nice or something. Um, yeah, it's what follows after that for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I
And
think books really encourage us to think more deeply about things and to really dig into stuff, especially stuff like Abercrombie. I know that's someone that we all read, or stuff like Malazan, where it's not just a story, but the author is really digging into some real stuff. And it really encourages you to dig in more too. That's one of the great things. I feel like I've grown so much as a person because of a lot of the stuff that I've read.
yeah,
Yeah. I Same here. Same here. And I think it's interesting, like, one thing that I really appreciated about Malazan specifically is I feel like because it is a fantasy series that does take such a different approach to fantasy, it made me much more open-minded to different forms of narrative. Whereas before, I think I would kind of cop out by saying, well, I'm just a character-driven reader, that kind of thing. And yes, I do love a deep, in-depth psychological study of a character any day, sure. But there are other types of narrative too. There are even stories in which the characters are flat but still serve a purpose in the story. And sometimes I say, "Oh, I'm not a plot-driven reader." But what about that one time when you were? So just being able to reframe your mind and realize, oh, there could be a different shift that you can have with this story in order to appreciate what it's doing in a different way. So I don't know. That's something I appreciate, and that I'm constantly trying to see. Oh, wow! I don't know. It's exciting for me. I'm like, cool. Like, how far can I push the boundary on what I think I don't like, and then learn differently about it? Because I feel like the best authors for me are the ones who prove me wrong about things I don't think I like, and then suddenly I do like it. So
Yeah, those are the books that oftentimes stick with us the hardest too.
that's right. Some of my favorite reviews are books that I was like very mixed about. I did Kings of Paradise by Richard Nell, and I really enjoyed reviewing that book because there was so much of it that I thought was great, and there was so much of it that I thought was like kind of wonky. And I was like, how do I balance this review without making it seem that I'm just being mean or fawning? Because both things kind of happened whenever I
Hmm.
read that book. Those are I read Cage of Souls by Adrian Shafkowski, if that's how you say his name. And I did not like it, but I felt like I had so much to say about it. I ended up not actually filming that review because it got lost in the shuffle. I think it was towards the end of the year or something. But I had so many notes on that book because I didn't like it. And when I don't like something, I feel more of a pressure to defend why I didn't like it, probably because I lean towards being, kind, I would say. I'm not going to say I'm overly positive about everything, but I do try to be kind. And I always want to have receipts, as the kids say nowadays. Do you all feel like one or the other, like positive to negative, requires more proof for you as a reviewer, or no?
That's a good
I think
question.
both. These days, I put a lot of pressure on myself to explain both sides. And I think part of that is because I feel like without consciously being aware of it, and I think I am just naturally very enthusiastic whenever I'm excited about something, I feel like my excitement comes across in the tone of my voice, in my mannerisms, and people pick up on that energy. And right away, it's like, do you want to love the book? I might love that book, but I don't really want people to pick up a book just because I love a book. I would rather they pick it up because it's something very specific I said about the book.
Mhm.
And so in a way, I'm almost kind of trying to I don't know if I'm trying to tone down my energy, because I think that's fun and I don't necessarily want to do that, but I want to be very specific too.
Yeah. I'm glad you went first, Joanna, because I needed a minute to think about that, because I've never considered it from that light, Jimmy. Because I think the way I view reading, because reading is so subjective as far as what people are going to get out of a book, you can't predict it from person to person, because life experiences are so essential in how we perceive literature. So for me, I kind of view my channel, especially my second channel where it's all reviewing and just chatting about books. I view that as just like, hey, I'm a person here talking about what I like and what I don't like. Like I just don't expect anyone to come away from it feeling like they've learned something. I expect people to come away from it just hanging out with me, and
Yes.
hearing my thoughts. So on the main channel, I try to do more like, video essays, discussions, like more educational stuff. But on the second channel, which is where I do my reviews, that's how I view it. But so I've never considered it from the perspective of proving anything, because I don't expect anyone to walk away with anything other than like, we hung out, we talked about books. But now that you've asked, and now that I've had to think about it, I think there is a side of me when I don't like something, especially when I don't like something popular, that I have to acknowledge. I know why people like this, and I know what you're going to say to me when I say I don't like this element. And I know how you're going to justify it. So let me just go ahead and argue with you preemptively so that I can let you know that I've already thought about that and I still don't like it.
That is literally why I use Bobby B and I have him talk in my videos back here, so I can have that argument without it. Because I feel like I go through pre-qualifiers and I annoy myself. I'm like, stop pre-qualifying everything you're saying and just say what you want to say. So I'll have Bobby B back here say the counterpoint. Like, didn't you say it had good characters in the last video? Well, yeah, of course I did, Bobby. But what I really meant was, you know what I mean? Like, I get that out a little bit. Because I drive myself crazy. Like, I can talk I sit on the fence and I can argue with myself.
That's a really fun way to do that, though.
It is.
Mhm.
Yeah. It made me less annoyed with myself at times. So it's a pain to edit, but it's fun.
It's a clever tactic. I think it's a clever tactic because preemptively arguing with people can come off as defensive, when that's the nature of making book videos. Is even though you're trying to encourage conversations and you will be in the comments, it is still one-sided. And so you almost feel like you have to get it all out first. And that can make it seem defensive when you don't mean it to be. So you doing that in more of a lighthearted way kind of takes that edge off.
Yeah, and I hope that there's viewers out there that agree with Bobby me more than me. I hope that people end up thinking he's smarter than me at some point. He is very mean to me most of my videos, but we're still friends, right? Right? He's shy. He doesn't talk on live stream.
I don't blame him. It's nice of him to show up at least.
Yeah, I had to pay him a show fee, but it's okay. Mark Addy approved.
Understandable. Got to get that bag.
Have to. I really love what you said, though, that somebody is, hanging out with you while you're talking about a book. Because a lot of times I think there is some paralysis by analysis, and there are people who are wonderfully articulate about things that I cannot speak to, like Philip or Critical Dragon or whoever else, right? And I love that. But for me, it has always been about like, I read this book, I want to give some impressions of it. I do want to get better at reviewing, but at the end of the day, it's just me and my thoughts. And I'm never trying to sell a book, right? I'm never trying to be like, I want everyone to buy this or something like that. And I think that there are times where enthusiasm can be taken for something else, and people feel like it's some sort of like shilling or whatnot. I've had these comments before.
Oh, sure, it's the internet.
Yeah, and that's just not really what I'm doing. It's much more about that raw, authentic reaction, as someone said in the chat. So I just love the way you put that. Someone to come hang out. We talked about a book, and that's it. I think that's
so you're not on a book revolution like Alan, trying to get everybody to read Long Price Quartet? Or
well, no, there's certainly series I would like for people to read more of, but I think there are times where people feel like, you're trying to push something or whatnot, and that's never really
Read The Gentleman Bastards.
It's so good.
He has.
So
he
good.
read the first two, right?
Yes, I think that was the first video I ever watched of yours, actually.
Really? I think it's not your Malazan video was the first I've watched of yours, but once I found your channel, I searched for Gentleman Bastard videos. I watched them.
Yeah, that's actually one of my favorite reviews I did, because I felt like I just really loved Scott Lynch's writing, and that's something I pay attention to. Like why did this sentence work for me? And I just really loved his writing style a lot.
I love his writing style.
I think I even said in the review, like, the story's not necessarily my favorite story of all time, and I didn't take away maybe like as much as I've taken away from other works, but I was just like enamored with the way that he wrote, and he uses a lot of alliteration. He's a fantasy writer, and he feels like he's proud of that lineage. And I think that he comes from like that Le Guin side of things, where don't be afraid to tell a story, and in the way that you want to, and make the style the story. And I think he did that. And I even liked book 2. I thought book 2 was a lot of fun. So.
It's so good.
Yeah.
I'm glad. It makes me happy. A compliment towards Gentle Bastards is a compliment towards me. So
I picked up the first book because of you before I had a channel. So, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
I'm so happy.
And, and I love Red Seas Under Red Skies. I just need to get to the third one at some point, but yeah. When I read Red Seas Under Red Skies, I spent a long time between books 1 and 2. And when I picked it up, I was like, wow, I had forgotten what an amazing writer Scott Lynch is. He is a very skilled writer. I feel like I appreciate it even more now than I did before. So yeah, he's amazing.
Yay. The third one is the one that has the most mixed reception, but I still think it's great.
Yeah, I'll probably get to that hopefully sometime this year, and then I'll be waiting with everyone else. No one wants to read unfinished series, but I do.
Know.
I'm in.
Really?
I love
it. Doesn't bother me.
No.
There's so many books that I want to read that it's like, well, he'll get to it when he gets to it.
I saw a video. I don't remember who posted it. And if it's your video and you're watching this, I'm sorry, but they said that A Song of Ice and Fire was overrated because it wasn't finished. And I was like, I honestly, it was mind-boggling to me, because I'm like, the books itself, like for series, I guess it kind of makes sense, but like for not being finished, it has a massive impact on the entire genre. So if anything, it's almost more impressive. The fact that it isn't finished and it's had this effect, I think says even more about it, which kind of threw me for a loop. But I don't mind unfinished series. Like I just don't care, I guess. I don't know. I'm weird.
I'm with you.
Yeah, same here. Clearly. Yeah. I think somebody commented like that. I made a comment like that on one of my videos for Game of Thrones, and I was like, no, it's still so good. It's still so good.
Oh,
but
Eric McLaurin put something in the chat. He said, is it possible to overanalyze the enjoyment of a book? I think that's a really good question. And yes, I've absolutely talked myself out of loving a book before.
Really? You've talked yourself out of it?
Yeah. Like, so everyone that is like on my channel and part of my Patreon are so tired of hearing the story. But whenever I read Dandelion Dynasty, I loved it. I loved book 2 so much. I did a rave review very quickly after finishing the book, which I very rarely do. I try to like calm down and then do reviews. But I was like breathlessly talking to the camera. I loved it. And a lot of people picked it up that are viewers of mine. And I would say half of them didn't like it.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, maybe I'm wrong. Like maybe I am just like, maybe I'm just off here.
That's so funny.
And for a while there, like I was just like struggling, like, did I really like love that book as much? Like maybe I'm wrong. Cause I do, it affects me whenever people come back and tell me like I hated that. Not because I don't want to hear it, but because like I feel like I let them down or something. I don't know. It's like this
Interesting.
weird feeling I get. And yeah, I don't know. I struggle with that, but I've actually come around to the fact that I was not wrong and I did love it that much. It just happens to
Mhm,
be one of those series that isn't as big of a broad hit as I thought it would be. I
mhm.
thought that like for instance, I read The Ninth Reign by Jen Williams, the Winning Flame trilogy. I read book 1 and half of book 2. I actually DNF'd the series. I didn't really care for it, but I was like, man, this is weird that this isn't a bigger hit on like our space, because I think it has a lot of the elements that people like of some of the more, fawned over series. And I'm like, that's strange. And I thought that with Dandelion Dynasty after I finished book 2, but now looking back on it with other people's perspectives, I'm like, I could see why this doesn't work for a lot of people.
Hmm.
But yeah, I had to struggle with that for a while. I was like, did I really love that book? Or did I just, get caught up in the hype of everything that was happening? But
I find that fascinating because that's Gentlemen Bastards for me. I think
Mm.
well over half of the people that comment about Gentlemen Bastards on my channel are people saying, I hated that. Why do you
yeah,
like it? And to me, I'm just like, yeah, totally. It's a really unique narrative style. It doesn't fit any of the standards, and it's also pretty crass. So I get it. It's not going to be for everybody. No problem. I'm curious what it is that makes you feel personally responsible. Is it just because they did it based off of your recommendation?
yeah, because I take it very serious. Like if someone has spent money on a book and they tell me
Mm.
like, I bought this book because of you, and they don't enjoy it, like just like the way that I came up, like I know how much that money can mean. And it's just like I
Sure.
feel a sense of responsibility for that. Um, Again, it's never been my I've never wanted to move units. That's never been my goal, but I am aware that people, come to me for recommendations and stuff. So I think that's why I also feel responsibility to like over explain myself, and in my
Mm,
reviews try to represent both sides of things. When I read Perdido Street Station, that was easy because I was like, oh, I see why some people would not like this at all, and that's very easy to talk about. But like, I love that book. But that one's like a lot easier because it's polarizing from page 1. Whereas some other books, they're harder to put that scope on. And for some reason, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm an idiot. I just I just feel bad. I don't want to.
is that why you take a break between reading a
Yeah.
book and reviewing
Yep.
it?
100%.
So
Yeah.
it's not because okay, so my assumption was that it was because you want to be composed. You don't want to be over the top and like crazy in your review, but it's actually because you want to make sure that you do some distance so that people don't feel any sort of pressure from you.
Yeah, and I don't ever want to misrepresent something. I think there's a certain amount of time after a book where I can kind of come down on something because
Mhm.
there's only so many hyperbolic statements or superlatives that you can throw on something. Like you can only have so many best standalones ever until
Mhm.
people start recognizing that you use that phrase all the time. Like I think
Mhm.
words matter. And when I say something like that, I want it to mean like I really want to mean it. And
Mhm.
there are times where recency bias plays into it without a doubt. So for me, that is one of the reasons. And I don't want everyone to agree with me. Like that's not that's not my goal, but it's more so I don't want people to feel like I sold it as something it was not. And that's something you got to get good at.
Interesting.
Like I think that takes some
I
time.
agree. Yeah, I feel that way. I felt that way last year or a couple years ago. I remember I was talking about how much I loved the book Before the Coffee Gets Cold, and I don't know, I don't know what it was, but for whatever reason, when I read it, it just spoke to me. It was heartwarming. It was everything I needed in a day when I read it. And I had a few people reach out and say, "Oh, I picked it up because of Juana's recommendation, and I didn't really like it." Man, it was hard to not to feel a little bad because of that, because of the time and the money and all of that. And I thought, I hope I represented the book correctly. I'm not saying that like I regret gushing about a book that I loved, but
Mhm.
it's that, yeah, that's something that kind of made me question myself a little bit. Did I explain enough about it? But even then, I think people are still going to go off the energy that you give about a book sometimes, even more than what you have to say. That's been what I've noticed anyway.
Mhm.
Do you feel the reverse as well? If you didn't like something and then people come back and they're like, "This was amazing. What are you on about?" Does that make you question? your dislike, or is it only the like?
A tiny bit.
Yeah, I would say I actually like that more because like I'm willing to admit that I got something wrong. Like there's very few books that I'm 100% like know that how I feel about them. Like you can revisit things. So yeah, I think that I actually enjoy that a little bit, and sometimes it makes me reevaluate. Like maybe I need to give it another shot because we want to. I mean, at least me, I want to enjoy the books I read. Like I would like to have fun. I do this for fun. This is not a scholarly activity for me. This isn't, this is nothing but something I want to enjoy. So when people come back, like I've had a lot of people talk about The Pry, and they're like, no, like it's really good. This guy, he understands like medieval time, blah, 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 blah. You should try it again. And I'm like, maybe I will. Maybe I will. Who knows? So.
Yeah. For me, I'm kind of famous for not loving Jade City by Vonda Lee. I just didn't. I just really struggled with that book, and it was a few years ago, and so it's hard for me to pinpoint specifics. I have some ideas of why I didn't connect with it, but yeah, I've had so many people come back to me and be like, "Oh, you're wrong. That book is amazing. You need to, So it's to the point where I might continue on in the trilogy, and I am open to being wrong about things, and maybe it was a timing thing, but yeah, I really just
You're not wrong about not liking it, though. I just want to throw that out there. You're not wrong about not liking it. You can have your own taste. It's okay.
Yeah, my husband begged me to DNF the book because I was like yawning every other page turn. So
I didn't like it either. You're okay.
Yeah.
Like I'm not judging you for that.
I'm validated. Merphy did not like Jade City.
Jade City, I was okay. I was hopeful. The ending made me like, all right, I see where it's going now. And then I read the sequel and I was like, nope, don't like it, done.
Wow. Yeah. I did think it got a little better towards the end, but man, I've never tried so hard to love a book. Like I tried to love it because I wanted to love it so badly. And I love The Godfather, the movie. So that inspiration was what sold me on trying the book in the first place, but I just didn't connect with it.
It's very interesting. One theme that Jade City has, and this isn't really a spoiler, I guess, but is the whole idea that like, you have this granddaughter that was like the grandpa's favorite, and then she becomes her own person, and then the grandfather no longer sees her as his favorite. And I actually really like that theme because I'm like halfway through the book right now, and that is something I don't feel like gets explored as often, and I really like that about that book. I'm only halfway through. So
good. I'm glad you like it.
Yeah, glad you like it too.
There's stuff I don't like.
We're the odd ones out. You'll probably love
the odd one out. Yeah. Totally fine with that. I want to thank this person, Naruto Adsage. I'm not sure if I'm saying your name right.
I think it's
thank
Naruto.
you so much for Naruto, like the manga,
the anime.
Right?
Yeah.
Anime manga. Yeah. As someone who has never read much, is there any effective way to find books that I would enjoy? I know what genres I enjoy, but no idea where to start. So I'll turn the question over to you two.
It's tough to give a recommendation if you don't know the person or know even small facts about a person. So I guess it depends. Are you into lighter stuff? Do you like more plot-driven stuff? Are you more into characters? Do you want something that really digs into themes or something that's just going to entertain you? I don't know. But if you just want a general recommendation, I would say something relatively short so that you'll feel accomplished quickly. And it would be great if there was an adaptation that you liked and you could read the source material, because then you're like expanding a world and characters that you're already invested in. Jimmy, go. Outshine me.
Great
I
answer.
don't think that's going to happen. I think that's good advice. I would start with something that it's hard because I know there's going to be there's so many things to dive into, but I would actually start with something that's popular, because usually when something's popular, there's community around it. And if you end up struggling with a piece or you want to talk about it, you're going to get kind of, the benefit of reading socially, and that is having people to discuss with. And I think that's what most of us yearn for, coming to something like this. So that's what I would recommend. It says you haven't read much, but if you have read, what I would do is I would see whoever your favorite author is right now and find out who inspired your favorite author, and then find out other people that author has also recommended. I've done this with George R. R. Martin, reading Roger Zelazny, Jack Vance, going back into time almost. And that's how I found Tad Williams. I mean, Tad Williams is one of my favorite authors now. And it's all because George R. R. Martin said, this is the guy that kind of pushed me to do epic fantasy, which I thought was just amazing. So that's what I would do. I mean, it says you haven't read much, but I would assume you have read something and you've enjoyed it. Maybe see who inspired your favorite author.
Also, if you're into Naruto, then maybe try Cradle, because it's a really good transition from manga to novels. It's progression fantasy. It has that kind of vibe.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Wonderful advice. I would also say, even though I'm the worst to mention this because I don't really watch a lot of shows, but if you're somebody who enjoys watching shows or movies, then it might be good to notice what kind of genres you enjoy in that arena and see if you could find books that match that style. I think that would be another entry point. Like if you love anime, then you might want to check out manga.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
And don't let a bad reading experience make you think that reading isn't for you, or there's not something that you can enjoy out there. I would tell you that if you're not feeling it, no one's going to judge you for putting it down. And if they do, they're stupid. I remember like getting into BookTube and like I was reading stuff, and I was always trying to find like the next to Song of Ice and Fire. And a lot of people told me to read Wheel of Time. And I got to like Wheel of Time book 4, which is like one of the most beloved books. And I'd watch like every Daniel Green video, and he like got me so excited for it, but I read it and I didn't like it. And I remember being like, oh, like maybe fantasy isn't for me. Like maybe this just isn't the right genre. Maybe reading isn't for me, which sounds silly, but I don't know. Whenever you hear, I was in groups that's what was praised. So I felt like I was missing something. And I was like, I guess I just don't like fantasy. Fantasy is so much more than swords and dragons and magic. Like there's so much out there that you can explore, and it's almost too broad of a description for what we read. So I would just encourage you to not feel discouraged if what you pick up is not your favorite. And I do think starting with shorter books is actually a great piece of advice. I think that's a great way to go about it. I almost would even say standalones are the way to go, just because like if you read series, like I don't know, sometimes like, and that is your pillar to judge everything off of, like it could rob you of joy of other things. So it's all going to depend on the person though.
Joanna, you don't quit books. You don't DNF.
I do. I do DNF audiobooks.
Oh,
So
you
I
do?
Just audio.
Yeah.
Oh,
Just
okay.
audio.
Why?
I do explain that in the video.
You do? I don't remember
why it
that
is-
part.
Yeah, I did say I have two exceptions.
You did. You said if the narrator doesn't connect, like you don't like the way they're narrating.
Yeah.
I remember.
And then
that
I
now.
might consider picking up the physical book later, or if I cannot concentrate on what's happening, like if I try to read something that's complex, especially if it's fantasy, I really struggle with audiobooks sometimes, like especially if it's a fantasy book, like following what the heck is going on. So I do make an exception with that. But yeah, as far as physical reading is concerned, I really struggle to DNF books. And part of the reason for that is because I have such a long history of having DNF'd over and over and over and over again. Like I could not finish a book for several years of my life. I could not finish. And it was such a deflating experience for me because I knew deep down I loved reading and I felt like a fraud because I was like, I know I love fantasy and I know I love reading and I can't finish a darn book. But another insight that came up for me since making that video that I never gave thought to was back then when I used to DNF all the time. Unlike now, I didn't know what to read next. So I didn't really have like a TBR back then. I think a lot of people can relate to this pre-BookTube. Like you don't have a TBR, you just kind of pick up whatever sounds good next. And not that I'm strict about TBRs now, but back then I just like, if I got stuck on a book, I didn't really have another book waiting for me that would excite me or propel me to continue. So I wonder if that influenced that too. So I just want to put that out there.
No, that's a good point though. I think I DNF'd a lot more often pre-BookTube as well, because I would just go to the library, find a nice cover, grab it. And you're not picking books fit to your taste when you're doing that. That's fun to do every now and then, but if that's how you pick all your books, you're going to pick a lot of duds for you.
Yeah.
In BookTube, you're getting a taste of what each book is, and you can say, I love that element, I hate that element, and you can curate what you're going to read.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there books that you all can think of that you were going, like, you almost wanted the DNF and ended up turning the ship around for you?
Oh no, dude, I'll DNF so fast. I no, even now, like I'll push a little bit farther. Like I'll usually give it about 100 pages. But I was reading The Nightmare Man. I was reading a thriller, mystery, something. And I was so into it. Like I had the strings on the wall, connecting it all, finding the murderer. And then it just got convoluted. And I had like a chapter left in the book. And I was like, you know what? I don't want to read it. And I stopped because I was over it.
A chapter left.
I don't know. It's like if you stop liking something, you stop liking it, you know?
Wow. That's pretty amazing. That's pretty amazing.
I respect that. I love it.
I hope you had a good ending. What about you? You answer your own question.
Ooh, Joanna, you answer and I'll think about mine.
Oh,
well, mine's going to be pretty surprising to people. But honestly, if I was somebody who DNF'd, a couple of books that I would have DNF'd, one is Babel by R.F. Kuang. I don't regret having finished it, but it just, even after finishing it, like, it just didn't leave the impression I was hoping it would for me. But I did remember distinctly thinking when I was like 30% to halfway through, I'm like, I am not connecting with this. I'm not connecting with her writing style. And then the other book that might surprise people is To Ride Hell's Chasm by Jenny Words, which was one of my favorite books of last year. Because I felt like her prose, she just uses a lot of archaicisms. She has a very formal approach to writing, and I struggled really connecting with it. It felt like I just could not connect with it for like the first 90 pages or so. I was really struggling with the writing style, and then something switched in my brain, and then after that 90-page mark or whatever, suddenly I was hooked. I was immersed. So. Yeah.
I don't think there's ever been a book that I wanted to DNF and I finished it and I was like, man, I'm glad I didn't DNF it. I actually don't think there is.
That's what I'm saying, Jimmy. That's what I'm saying. That's why I'm so comfortable doing it, because usually you know if it's not for
I
you.
need to DNF more, because there's definitely books that I'm like, why did I finish this? And then I'm like, meh, throw it on the pile, like whatever.
My problem is my brain shuts off. Like if I'm not enjoying something, then I'm not retaining it. And I don't enjoy just sitting for a while doing the thing that I love, one of the things that I love more than anything, and coming away feeling like, man, I probably retained like half of that because I was bored, so my mind was wandering. And then it's like, this is my hobby. This is the thing that I love. Why am I doing this?
Do you feel like now, maybe pre and now not post current booktube, do you feel that your retention is better or worse than it used to be, or the same?
That's a good question. I think my retention is worse now. I don't think it's because of booktube. I think it's because I'm getting old. And I just maybe I could blame social media. I feel like people blame social media for everything. I'll blame social media.
There we go.
No, I think just, I've got kids, I've got a busy personal life. Like there's a lot going on. And so my mind wanders a lot more quickly. And I find myself having to reread passages far more often now than I did, maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Do you feel like it's affected you?
Sometimes I think so, but then other times no, because there's sometimes I read a book and I remember every single thing that happened in it.
Mm-hmm.
And it might have even been a favorite.
Mm-hmm.
But then there are books that just go in one ear out the other. I just finished The Anubis Gates by Tim Powers, and oh man, what an amazing book. I loved it. But I feel like it would be impossible for me to forget that book because it's so out there. Like it's so wacky and so different than anything I've read that that will stay with me. So I find myself being attracted to and enjoying like things that are a little bit against the grain, or maybe not as common. Right. And that's something like I've noticed, especially with self-published. I always want self-published to like surprise me a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm going into it thinking like, okay, you don't have to worry about marketing. You don't have to worry about commercial viability. I mean, you obviously want it to be commercial.
You do, but yeah.
but it's a different thing. And I've
Yeah.
always want someone to bring something different. Like Combat Codes, I thought was really cool because it was also focused around jiu-jitsu and mixed martial arts. But no, it's out there. Like I hadn't really read a traditionally published book like that ever. And now it's traditionally published because he happened to find a niche and it was successful and all that good stuff. But yeah, I feel like books that kind of stand out against like the norm, the standard fare of fantasy, are the ones that kind of stick with me. So I don't necessarily know if my retention overall has gotten worse, but I do feel like what I remember has changed and the reason for it.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
What about you, Joanna?
That's interesting. So yeah, I don't know. For me, my retention on books, I feel like it's 100% dependent on how much I sleep. I know that sounds kind of silly, but honestly, sleep affects me nowadays more than I've ever noticed before. Like if I don't sleep a good 7+ hours, then I could tell I'm struggling and rereading the same passages over and over again. But if I get a good amount of sleep, then I usually am pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
that definitely makes sense. Jimmy, you mentioned going against the grain. I feel that way a lot. I think with the amount that we read, or I'll speak for me, the amount that I read, a lot of times I can tell where books are going. Like I know who has plot armor. I know when the climax is coming. I know, like, okay, this and this and this are kind of clues to this is the plot direction we're going. Like when you consume something so much, you get the formula.
Yes.
And books that intentionally go against the formula, like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, I've recently gotten into Discworld, like books that are spinning in the face of the formula have become my bread and butter. Like I adore them because it's like, I have no idea what's around every corner and I'm constantly surprised and it's amazing.
I was instantly thinking of Men at Arms because you were mentioning that. I'm like, I'm curious if you'll see where that goes.
I'm sure I won't.
Yeah. And even any Lawson book, there's no way I could have ever guessed where any of those books went.
I feel that way about Abercrombie too. He's constantly surprising me in what direction, but it always makes sense. Character motivations, who the characters are, it always makes sense, but it's always surprising. And it's when that formula is broken that it's like, okay, this is something special.
Yeah, I think Game of Thrones also does that. Obviously, there's a big event in Game of Thrones that people are like, "Whoa, that was so shocking!" But on the reread, you go, "This was obvious. This is obviously going to happen." There were so many bad decisions made up to this point, and so many self-righteous moments for this character, and you're like, "This makes perfect sense." But when you first read it, you're like, "Whoa!" Then in book 3, you're like, "Whoa!" But it made sense. It actually was consistent.
How does rereading affect you all? Because right now I'm actually rereading A Song of Ice and Fire. And I noticed like with the Game of Thrones, I just finished A Clash of Kings. And I feel like the first time I read those books, I was just on the edge of my seat, like full of suspense, like, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? Oh my goodness, I can't believe that happened. But on the reread, it's been amazing. And my heart's been pumping still. And I'm still like excited over it and energized over it, but it's kind of different too, because obviously I know what's going to happen. So how does rereading affect you two? Do you two reread?
Go ahead, Jimmy. It looked like you were about to talk.
Oh no, I was just being off.
All right, I'm on it. So I love to reread. I think it's super fun. And for me, it's like hanging out with a friend. It's like re-entering your old world, and your like to murder other people are hanging out with you too. It's just like we're all together, and it's like it's while the first read is exciting and thrilling, to me the second read, even something brutal, is cozy, and it's like this is my home, this is where I belong.
Yeah, I'm trying to reread more, especially now that I've gotten through a lot of the bigger series that I really wanted to get through. Like, if you had told me I was going to finish Realm of the Elderlings and Malazan within like a year and a half, like I would have been like, there's no way. But I did, and those were like two of my biggest ones of reading, right? So for me, when I've reread, I'm always nervous that I'm not going to like it as much. And it has never been the case where I reread something and I like it less. And that one tells me maybe my taste isn't as different as it used to be as I think it is. But also that there's other things to appreciate when on a reread. I find A Song of Ice and Fire to be very comforting for some reason. Like, even though all this
Yes.
war is happening and all the things, and we pass, the Riverlands. I'm like, oh yeah, like I know that place. And for me, it's kind of cozy. So rereading something, one, I want to do more of, because I think that also once you're done with like what's next, like what's next, so you can live in the moment a little bit more. And sometimes even the slower moments that people like complain about, they're almost more cozy because it's like, oh, this is some downtime with some of my favorite people or in my favorite place. And that's a new experience. And then I also believe when you reread something that if you're reviewing it, I think your reviews are better on a reread. I read Blood Meridian and then I immediately reread it. And Joanna joined me for a reread of it. And I read it very slowly on the reread. We did like 10 pages a day. And I had much more to say the second time I read it than I did the first time. And I think that if I were to put out a review for it, that it would have been a lot better post the second read than prior to the second read. So there are books that I think warrant rereads too. So
yeah, that's interesting because one, I love what you said, Merphy, about it feeling like returning to a friend. And that there's, and I think you even said that too, Jimmy, that there's something cozy about it. That's my experience too, at least with the Song of Ice and Fire so far. But I also feel like it's interesting because I don't know, I'm sure there are some exceptions to this. And I was actually just having this conversation with Brittany the other day, but I don't know that I've ever enjoyed a book more on a reread or less on a reread. I feel like it always surprises me. I always expect to love a book more on a reread. And I usually, if I loved it the first time, I love it the second time, but I don't feel like I ever love it more, but I do find myself appreciating different things more. So, for example, when I reread, and I know you mentioned this in your review, Jimmy, but when I reread The Fellowship of the Ring, The Council of Elrond, the first time I read that chapter when I was a kid, I thought it was so boring. I was like, this is like a faculty meeting or something. Like, come on, can we just please do something already?
Frodo on the minutes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so I was so bored. And I just remember I could not wait to get through that chapter. And I felt like it was an eternity to get through it. And upon rereading it a couple years ago, I was so into it. I was like, this is so amazing. And it just seeing all the representation in Middle Earth, I loved it. So it was just interesting to see how that shifted on a reread. But did I love Lord of the Rings more rereading it than I did the first time I read it? I don't know if I loved it more, but I did love it both times. It was a different experience, but I don't know if I loved it more. So I don't know, I just find it interesting to consider that.
That is interesting. I do have to hop off now, which I'm sad about because this conversation has been so much fun. But I have to go relieve my husband of the kids. But before I do, Jimmy, here's another book recommendation. Vagabond.
Already got him.
Yeah.
Haven't read him yet.
Good. All right, good.
Merphy, I do got to tell you before you go that I actually invited Philip to read Vinland Saga, and he told me I can't. I'm doing it with Merphy. And I've never forgiven him, but I just wanted you to know that Philip is a traitor, and he will stab you in the back as well.
I'm so sorry, Philip. He would never stab me in the back. I'm his favorite.
Merphy steals Philip from us.
I steal friends. It's what I do.
She's just collecting the book.
I'm sorry for stealing Philip from you. Maybe, never mind. I was about to say maybe he'll read Vagabond with you, but he's reading it with me. So that was just.
I plan on 1 star.
I'm not trying to be a jerk.
Yeah, I'm going to 1-star his book. It's fine.
Oh, good.
Well, Merphy, thank you so much for joining us today. And I guess we'll go ahead. I mean, we've been going for 123. I don't know if we want to go ahead and just end it here. It's up to you, Jimmy.
You're the host.
Oh.
Your show.
Well, I guess we could go ahead and end the broadcast here, but I just want to thank everybody so much for joining us in the chat. And I want to thank my wonderful guests, Merphy, Napier, and Jimmy Nuts. I hope I get to have more discussions with you two in the future because this was just so much fun. And so
this was wonderful.
Absolutely.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.